All right, welcome back. This week we're going to learn more about the psychology of stress. So let's get started. All right, so this video will begin by reviewing stress and the three types of stress that we identified last week. Then we'll examine the difference between eustress and distress. And last, we'll discuss how to begin to rethink stress. All right, do you remember me asking you this question in our last video? Is your life stressful? I suspect that most of you said, yes, my life is stressful. You may have even rated it high. Well, whatever level your stress is, most of us can agree that life can feel stressful at times. So let's review those three types of stress that might experience. All right, but first let's define what stress is. So simply stated, stress is the psychological and biological response, what is happening in your mind and your body when confronted with a stressful situation. Activators or stressors are the stimuli that provoke these responses in the mind and body. So basically, stress is what we experience in the mind and body as a result of a stressor. So as we discussed last week, there are three types of stress that we can experience: acute, chronic, and anticipatory. Acute stress is experienced for short periods of time, so this can be something like a quiz or a homework assignment, planning a party, or going to the dentist. Chronic stress, on the other hand, this is stress that we experience for a long period of time, so with no real end in sight. So some examples of this can be work-related, driving for long periods of time, so maybe there's a really long commute to work each day. Unhealthy relationships can cause chronic stress. Sometimes people stay in unhealthy relationships because of the amount of time that they've invested into it, as well as other factors. But when that relationship is unhealthy, it can create stress and can become chronic stress. And then anticipatory stress, this is caused by something that is coming in the near future. So something that you're anticipating, like a test or maybe a presentation, first dates, as well as first day of school or first day of work, going back, right? This can cause some anticipation. And you're going to read more about that, these three types of stress this week. So stress is not caused. Stress does not just cause health issues. Okay, the effects of stress, especially chronic stress, can cause physical and mental health issues. So these include, but of course, are not limited to things like impairing the brain's ability to transport and use glucose, which is the brain's food source. Impairing neurogenesis, which is the ability to create new neurons. It can impede learning and memory, cause weight gain and other health complications, increase risk of cardiovascular disease, is associated with high levels of stress, diabetes, decreased defense against cancer cells, dementia is associated with high rates of stress, fertility problems, as well as compromised ability to fight infection. So basically, we just have lower, our lessened immune system, okay, weakened immune system. So now that we've reviewed the three types of stress and its impact on our physical and mental health, can you remember the major cause of stress that we talked about last week? So what causes stress? We did an activity in the previous video. I asked you to think about the causes and effects, and then we ended with one main word that causes our stress. So if you said perception, you are correct. Our perception of our experiences is what causes us stress. And we'll examine perception in more detail throughout this class. But this is why we can have almost the same experience as another person and notice that they are experiencing maybe higher rates of stress and we are not, or vice versa. Basically, our perceptions are influenced by our past experiences, especially our painful past experiences. And since we all have different experiences, we see the world through a different lens, through our own lens. And as a result, we experience stress based on our perception of what we perceive as threatening. So while this might sound a bit complicated, the good news is that we can lower our stress by changing our perception. Changing our perception of what we are experiencing and how we see or view those challenging situations. The situation remains the same, but our perception can change. So it's also important to know that there are things we can and can't control. So we can't change a course exam, but we can change the way we think about taking that exam and how we prepare for it. We can't change that there's a pandemic, but we can choose how we navigate through it. Bottom line is we have control over our perception and what we think, and this can help lower stress. So take a moment and answer this question. Is all stress bad? If you said no, then you are correct. Some stress is good for us to experience. So this stress is known as eustress. It is positive stress that motivates and inspires us. Our response system is energized by the sympathetic nervous system, and it helps us pursue and reach our goals in life. So, but remember, right, too little activation of that sympathetic nervous system can cause us to be bored and stagnant, but too much from perceived threats moves us beyond the optimal level of stress. And when this happens, the stress response becomes activated, that fight or flight mode, and stress levels go beyond the optimal levels. And at this point, you're no longer in eustress, it's now distress. Okay. If this is happening constantly, it can cause chronic stress, which can have negative impact on our physical and mental health, as we discussed earlier. So how can we begin to change our perception? First, we need to realize that we're in control of our own thoughts. So we can change our thinking, and this requires practice, which we'll talk about. Next, committing to engaging in everyday life, including work, school, family, things like that. These can also give us a source of meaning in our life, which we learned from Viktor Frankl is an important aspect to have that meaning and purpose in our everyday life. And last, we need to practice seeing challenges as opportunities rather than obstacles. So there's some optimism and hope instilled in this aspect of how to overcome the effects of stress. But remember, the most important ingredient here is that we practice. That's the challenging part. But the more you do it, the more automatic that it will become for you, and the bigger the results you'll see. So we've spent some time reviewing stress and the 3 types of stress we experience. We also learned about the need for eustress and or good stress in order to increase our motivation. And we ended with ways to begin changing our perception in order to decrease distress. Next week, we will learn more about the psychology of traumatic stress. And so until then, make it a great week.